Wow, that was awful. Yeah, but a new guy's joining us. That's basically what we're trying to say.
Hey, Red.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sailkite, also known as AB, and I am a member of Sentient Blender Productions. You guys don't know me yet, but hopefully over the course of doing a number of playthroughs and such, and possibly some other projects as well, that will change. I'm glad to have the opportunity to
We're not gonna get away
publish
with
some
this, are we?
content here with the Blenders, because these guys are good friends of mine in real life, and so it's just cool to be able to support their passion for games and such,
Pull.
and help out in various ways. So anyway, the
Together
first
again.
series that I'll be doing is a series on Transistor. Transistor is, I guess it would be most accurate to describe it as an action game, a very story-driven action game that was developed in, I think it was from 2014 by Supergiant Games, who were also the folks behind Bastion, if any of you know that title. Let's see where to start, I guess. So, basically, yeah, I guess I'll start with the character, and then I'll sort of go into some other background stuff as well. So you play as Red, who is a silent main protagonist, and you wield a weapon/device called the Transistor, which is this cool little sword dealio here with the red eye. And the Transistor has captured, I guess, the consciousness or the soul, you could say, of your
What a night.
lover, perhaps, or boyfriend.
That's all that matters.
It's never exactly made clear how exactly the dynamics of your relationship goes, but nevertheless, you wield this weapon, and you are essentially trying to get your voice back, and get revenge on the Camerata, who are the people who took
Found
it.
us already. They want you back.
The combat is a combination of sort of a turn-based, I guess you could call it, deal with also live play as well. So when you're not in combat, it's all live, and you're just sort of exploring the world and
let's
going
go.
through
One more
and doing
deli.
fun things.
For the bag.
Once you enter combat, you have the option to use what's known as your turn function, which lets you queue up a number of other functions, which are what they call attacks and abilities, and then you can execute these plans and then use that to try to win battles more easily and with less stress, perhaps, than trying to fight wholly in real time. The combat system, actually, the skill system, the functions, is really quite interesting. For anyone who's never played the game before, you can basically take any function or skill and use it to modify any other function or skill, up to 2 modifications per function. You can also equip functions as a passive, which gives you various things like a shield, or lets you pick up stuff from farther away, because whenever you kill an enemy, there are these pickups called cells that you have to go and gather, or else the enemy respawns. It's a really interesting setup, and the enemies progressively get more detailed, I guess, in terms of the abilities and threats that they offer throughout the games, like the various types. Like there's one called, there's the young lady,
Hey, up there.
which is sort of a fast attack, I guess I would call it, unit. Like whenever you hit it, it warps away and then spawns like a little ghost that attacks you.
Blocks away.
There are like shields that protect other process, which are what the enemies are known as. And so you need to, for instance, kill those units before you can actually attack the rest. And it's just, there's all sorts of other, sort of synergies too. Like there are enemies that eventually remove your ability to see certain parts of a level, wherever they are, and so it's just a very engaging combat system, whether you choose to use turn or not.
Block party up ahead.
Now, in spite of the fact that this game is incredibly fun just to play, irrespective of knowing anything else about it, I think one of the things that really elevates it above and beyond just a fantastic replayable game is the art and story direction. And, well, generally, I mean, I guess I would call it cinematography, if you will, or craft. Like all of these sort of not quite abstract, but certainly not usual elements of game design. You'll notice throughout various points in the story that the voice that talks to you, the transistor, has something of dynamic dialogue, which adapts to sort of certain choices or decisions that you make, or conditions, I should say, doing different things or waiting to do different things, and that these conditions will, result in a slightly different telling of the story every time, a slightly different level of characterization. This isn't to say there's much branching. Like, most of the branching is purely optional stuff that you can do on the side, sort of just to get more story out of the game. But it's definitely not. It's not the same quality of. It's not the same type. Not quality. Quality is a word I'll reserve for something else. But it's a different type of storytelling than, say, a Mass Effect or Elder Scrolls Fallout type kind of storytelling. It's much more intimate, perhaps, or more direct, but also it holds the viewer at a distance by virtue of its ultimate length and what it reveals. It's much more a system of signposts, I think, than necessarily reading a whole book. It's very suggestive of how things really are in the city and such. Now, the art style, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, if you've never seen anything of this game, is truly fantastic. Like, it's this wonderful, like, Art-Techo, I call it, like, technical Art-Deco. It's just stunning to look at. You can just sit around and look at it for ages. The illustrations are gorgeous things. It's a real pleasure to just look at, just standing there, hit tab to pull up Red's humming, and just look at it for a while, because it's really tastefully done, and it definitely binds a lot of the storytelling into a set of visual motifs that are, oh gosh, oh boy, here we go. We're talking about big business right now. Yeah, that's some literature right there. Visual motifs, which do a lot for setting the tone at various points in the story. And it's interesting though, because at this point I've gotten the first other function aside from Red's function and the Transistor's function. And it's interesting because the character's body that you pick it up from, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, Sylvia, I think. Her body, like her physical body, is appearing to be broken down by the process, which is something that is more understandable as the game progresses, and there are sort of lore-related things for what that actually means. But it's very interesting. Like, this might be something that only comes across when you play the game, like in person, and sort of sit down and let it digest inside your head. But it creates a very interesting world. Like, it's not so much the same as speculative fiction. I wouldn't call it something to that degree, where they're supposed to be thinking about these very high-level things. I think it's a much more down-to-earth form of pictorialism. Like, it's almost like a little fable or a fairy tale of a game. Even though it's so much more, of course, but like just the presentation makes it very sort of. I think you can read it that way, I guess, to put it simply. Right. What was I saying?
Side street.
The visual style, yeah. So her body is breaking down, and there's other examples of this that I'll try my best to point out during playthroughs and such. Like when we get to the boss at the very end of this episode, I will try to point out like a couple of details that I think are just magnificent, both during the fight in terms of design, the character design for Sybil, who's the boss that I'll fight at the end of this episode, and also for the aftermath of that fight. because I think there's just like you can see some of the brilliance in Supergiant's craft just from that 5 minutes or whatever of gameplay. It's really quite stunning. Now, I'd like to point out, because this game is so beautiful in many other ways, that I think it's hard to talk over it, unfortunately, because I feel like I'm competing with both the really, really good sound design. Like, the soundtrack is just, like, I'm gonna say Final Fantasy, right? So anyone who's played the various Final Fantasy games that Nobuo Uematsu, I think is how you pronounce it, has scored for, understands, well, and a lot of JRPGs too, to be fair, understands that there are certain moments that, when combined, like certain dramatic moments that, when combined with music in the game, and very like intentionally and deliberately designed and well considered music, supersede both and become this greater than the sum of its parts thing, where like you actually have a very poignant emotional response to a game, which is probably one of the scariest things that you can consider to have an emotional response to, because, you know, our general view on games is that they're just supposed to be entertainment, and usually a fairly cheap form of entertainment at that. I mean, maybe if you sort of go to a bit of a farther and more conciliatory view, that perhaps games are a good way to bond with people. You know, a certain type of people bond well over games. But for something single player like Transistor or Final Fantasy in most cases, that sort of bonding thing isn't necessarily available except in discussion about the game, and a little bit in playthrough formats and let's plays and things like this, but it's not so defined, I think. Or maybe it's just not explored yet. It's something that maybe a new generation of Let's Player might be able to sort of tease out of the wet work and really make something quite interesting.
Okay, you're in.
But anyway, it's not super enjoyable to compete with both the music and also the monologue that a dialogue between Red's actions and the Transistor's speech. And later on, it gets so gorgeous. It's because the Transistor, things happen, and then his vocal style and his vocal processing effects, like the effects that the designers put on his voice, change and modulate, and it works very well. Like it has a very, very evocative quality to it, which you'll see in later episodes, possibly even next episode, depending on how long it is. But yeah, let's see. just one moment. I need to keep track of some of my notes here. But anyway, so I guess while I'm looking at some of my notes for where exactly I want to go with this, I intend to do this series, and right now I've been talking with Austin and some of the other guys about getting this series complete and out there as sort of a test run. Anyone who's watching this now will understand quite quickly that I did not stream this on Twitch, and that is an intended decision. I do not have the hardware capacity for streaming at the moment, either in terms of network speeds or in terms of computer power. I'm running on a laptop, and a 2 or 3 year old laptop at that, so just running and recording a game at decent resolution, much less graphics settings, is not totally feasible if I want to maintain both playable and enjoyable to watch frames per second. However, because because there might be a chance that I can get the next series after this to work on fairly low settings, if it's something people can sort of stomach. My next series after this one, assuming that everything goes well and it's well received and you guys want to see more stuff from me with the blenders, will be Homeworld 1 and Homeworld 2, which are fantastic games. The remake is released this month. A remastered edition is released this month. The people who made it, Blackbird Entertainment and Gearbox, Blackbird Interactive, excuse me, and Gearbox Software, who you may know from Borderlands and other titles, have done a really good job. Blackbird is made up of very many people from the original developers of Homeworld from like the late 90s and early 2000s, Relic Entertainment, and I put it in the same sort of tier, if you will, as Transistor. It's a story-based game with good gameplay, but that at times is able to, through the combination of its sights and sounds and sort of just the dramatic implications of some of its writing, can really go beyond just, experiencing something. Yes. So, as you noticed by now, my combat proficiency in Transistor, to jump back into the Transistor vein of things, is not particularly high. I used to play this game. I played like a couple playthroughs using different setups when it first came out, but I haven't touched it in quite a while. It's probably been, I guess, over 7 months maybe since I've played it, and so my first take here on the run is gonna be loaded with a couple failures and and some puzzling out of some fairly obvious things. So please, I hope you'll bear with me on that. Laugh at my failure. Laugh at it. Enjoy my pain. Schadenfreude. Enjoy it. Remember how much better you are at this game than I am. So I guess I'll try my best to do some sort of more immediate discussion of what's happening right now, if there aren't any other pressing things that I want to wait to talk about first. Just check.
They do not have a sense of humor. They will track you down, wipe you out, and take whatever's left of me back to those 2-bit Camerata pieces of trash. Look, whatever you're thinking, do me a favor. Don't let me go.
Alright, yeah, so right now, this is the first major sort of story transition in the game, where you're given a glimpse into what the motive behind Red's actions are.
Poor bike. Just 10 more blocks.
So the Transistor sort of acquiesces, and he understands that Red is fairly driven.
They beat us here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get wrecked. Whenever I don't use turn, I'm pretty much guaranteed to make a lot of mistakes, especially if I'm not using a really good setup for whatever I'm fighting. So don't be too surprised by very inefficient play. So I guess I'll talk about some of the specifics here. So every action in turn takes some space. I mean, it's not, I don't know that there's an official term for whatever the turn energy bar is called, but basically every movement and then every single function will use turn time, to put it simply. And so basically in turn there are a couple of ways to boost your damage aside from just functions, and those are basically backstabs. If you run or teleport using one of the skills that I'll get shortly, if you teleport or walk behind an enemy, you'll be able to deal backstab damage to them, which is usually, I think, a 50% damage increase, and then you can possibly improve that using, or it might be only 25, I can't recall off the top of my head, and you can improve that with one of the modifications.
Fertile ground.
But yeah, this is I'm just playing with the little flower things here. They're really pretty. Like, they're so simple and primitive, but they're totally in the art style, and they create that sensation of how well designed the game is. It's just wonderful. This is wonderful.
Just have to get back to your place before it gets cold.
Yeah. So these terminals. Well, actually, I'll explain what this enemy does real quick. This enemy does area damage. So if you get near to it, it'll attack. It'll damage you. It doesn't really attack. It does damage over time, as long as you're nearby it. And later, it gets the ability to heal other process and things. So yeah. Right. Oh, the other way to improve damage though is through the first skill that I'm using here is a skill that puts basically it stuns enemies and makes them a little bit more vulnerable to damage on the next attack. Yep. So let's see. I guess so. My other roles within Sentient Blenders, I basically do a little bit of sound design, whether or not the stuff that I've helped out with so far is on the YouTube channel yet. I don't know. At the time of this recording, it's not up yet.
Never seen Cold Walk cleared out.
But yeah, so I just do sound design and music and stuff for those guys. Now you'll notice that
Preston Moyle. Guess he went out joyriding one night and never came back.
Oh right, I already had John. Goodness. Yeah. Once again, because of the disparity between my my computer hardware and my recording capability, unfortunately, I have to do after the fact recordings because there's just no way I can record and do audio at the same time. So yes, I do have Jaunt. I currently burned it out because I messed up some stuff, but I do have Jaunt, and Jaunt is basically a teleport. And it's very, very useful. It is almost crucial to survival at certain points of the game, and when you start getting into like new game, there's a new game plus of this as well, which basically you go through everything with the 4.0 versions of the enemies. Like right now we're fighting Creep 2.0s, and there are 4.0s, and they have more capabilities, and they're scary. It's wonderful, and I absolutely need Jaunt of some description to be able to fight them. Now, since I did show the overloaded function there, basically whenever your health bar reaches 0, right? So the health bar is the orangish kind of color, tan orange down at the bottom there above my functions. Whenever that reaches 0, you burn out your function. You burn out a random function, I believe. I don't know if it's a particular one or a random one, but you burn out that function, and all of the functions, the primary function and the one that you had once maybe that you had supporting it, get burned out. And so you can't use those until after you've gone to a certain number of access points, which are the little points in the ground that you can change your loadout at. So for instance, here I picked up Load. Load basically spawns landmines. And you can modify them various ways, and use it for fun and justice.
They got that loud.
And as you can see, it's a very serious damage potential. But yeah, so the game's lore actually on the characters, since we're in this sort of menu set, the lore on characters is unlocked by using different functions in different capacities. So using a function as a live function, like I'm using Jaunt here, will give me 1/3 of the information about
you've reached the hopefully not permanent address of Mr.
about Preston Moyle in that case. Now, if I were to use Breach as a modification on an existing skill, I would gain a little bit more information about him, and then if I were to use it as a passive ability, which I don't have any slots for yet. If I were to use it as a passive ability, I would also gain some more final at that point information about him. And of course, you can do that out of order, but it's just those 3 things get you all the lore.
Lillian Platt used to run the OVC. Said she left for personal reasons.
Right. Yeah. So you can do fun stuff with that. initial errors in information and reporting that I made at the beginning of this recording. I didn't have my video up, so I couldn't narrate along to it due to some technical errors with my playback software. But it's all worked out now, so I'm following along basically second for second now. Anyway, so I'm one of the things that makes this game so incredibly fun is just like throwing random functions in slots and then trying to make a build out of it. Sometimes it fails spectacularly, especially in certain scenarios, but other times you can get it to work. And some things are very, very well suited to turn, and other things can actually survive outside of turn if you're skilled and not really bad and out of practice, depending on the case. So basically, let's see. I'm trying to remember what build I was going for off the top of my head here. Probably just setting up stun bombs and then finishing with the
Good to go.
attack breach move or whatever. Yeah.
Go on, pop it.
Oh, and actually, I'll talk about just some little general strategy stuff while I'm using that ability. The 3 ability there is really useful for killing bad cells.
No cue to get in.
You've seen me fight a
That's
few
a
of them.
first. This can't be the channel.
But yeah, now
Guess what's inside?
so here comes an enemy that
More?
you will not notice on your first time playing, I guarantee you. And yeah, so I'm gonna be really dumb and not use turn until it's way late, because I'm just trying to be pro and not use turn. It's really all my fault. But yeah, jerks aren't that hard to fight at any particular point. You just have to not be hilariously dumb and get cornered and not do damage to them. As long as you're doing damage, you pretty much should be fine. And this is just exactly me trying not to get wrecked. So we successfully have taken out targets, and now I think there's one more. There we go. Now I'm not sure if I'll show this synergy at some point, but if you put get, or if you use get rather, you can take advantage of it to capture cells. I'll be right back just a second. Alright then. Let's see. Sorry, I had to do something real quick on my computer. Anywho. Yeah, so there you just saw an example of unlocking the lore briefly. Yeah, I think it's background, career, and personality, maybe, is the last one. But we won't be able to find that out this episode, unfortunately. Yeah, so... Right, anyway, so... I now understand how difficult doing these is, because it's hard to talk about something for an hour straight. Goodness gracious. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split this down into 2 half-hour approximately episodes, and then I will be able to actually come back and have something interesting to talk about for the rest of these, because otherwise there's going to be a whole lot of floundering. Anywho, I will go ahead and end this here, and see you all later. And thank you for having me. So this concludes episode 1 of Transistor, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you,
Admin's
and
just towing the line.
goodbye.
Yeah, I'll say.